Hello, everybody. Welcome to Medicine and Science on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Pellavito. I'll be your host for today's show. And today's show, we're going to be discussing something very important in the medical area, and that's misrepresentation. And the real problem that we're seeing today, because social media is so huge, including on the Pod TV network, where we had 2.3 billion verifiable views in 2023. I don't have the 2024 data yet. But a lot of people watch social media. It's just the way it is. Here's the problem. A lot of the people on social media just blatantly misrepresent what the truth really is. The recent one I saw was by, I think they call it the McCullough Foundation. And here was the misrepresentation. It wasn't a medical, it was a legal misrepresentation. There was apparently a lawsuit filed against the Gates Foundation, making such allegations as that he was benefiting from the virus and all sorts of stuff. And it was definitely a complaint. Looks like it was filed in my home state of Florida, where I'm licensed to practice for 40 years. And by all accounts, it looks legitimate, except it has a couple problems. Problem number one, it's a pro se litigant, which means that when you're a pro se litigant, no attorney reviewed any of the evidence. Anybody can throw anything in court. The McCullough Foundation acted like, hey, this is a legitimate lawsuit. Pro se litigants may not even be a legitimate lawsuit. Problem number two, they were alleging that the IRS should revoke his tax-exempt status. And the IRS is a defendant, and the IRS disagrees with him. So we got a problem number two, the merits may be poor. All right, so when you look at it objectively, it was just somebody throwing stuff against the wall. The problem with the foundation, they acted as if it was a big, legitimate lawsuit vetted by a law firm, and it wasn't. So with that, I can't opine on medical misrepresentation. I'm not a medical physician, but I am an attorney for 40 years, and misrepresenting things like this or slapsuits law could actually turn against them. But we do have a board-certified medical doctor who can help us out with the medical misrepresentations, and that's none other than the Honorable Michael Patman. So, Michael, welcome to Medicine and Science. Like I said, I don't know anything about medicine, but legally, I mean, you throw a suit up there and you act as if this is legit. And I will tell you that we get beat up all the time as members of the Florida Bar. You can't take a lawsuit and file a suit as an attorney without reviewing the evidence and seeing that they have a substantial claim. But if you're a pro se litigant, you can throw anything you want to it there. And there's a big difference. But anyway, some people picked it up and said, oh, yeah, Gates is horrible. Well, wait a minute. You got to really look at it. So what is your thoughts about this misrepresentation? It happens on LinkedIn a lot, I've been seeing, but it seems like there's no stop, and Facebook just created a policy where you can throw anything you want up there. I don't know what your thoughts on this.
Well, thank you. Good morning, Nick. Good morning, everybody. It's great to spend a few minutes with you. So this is an interesting topic because I actually became interested in this subject nearly 50 years ago as a medical student at the University of Nevada when I was involved in a case of a child. I think the child was 11, 12, 13 years old who had Hodgkin's disease, which is generally about 90% curable. And at that time, this child came under our care at the team I was involved with at the medical school there and at the medical center in Reno. And the parents had chosen to refuse treatment for their child, believing that the prescribed treatment was dangerous and that they could cure the child with an extract from peach pits called Laetrile that was popular back at the time. Well, the child died, sadly, and the case, the county brought a case against the parents, and parents went to trial, and they were actually found guilty for child endangerment and whatever charges, but no jail time or fine was imposed because the judge felt that they had suffered enough by the loss of their child. But the parents were actually put through the ringer because they believed misinformation. So I became very active and passionate 50 years ago about misinformation in medicine, and was involved with an organization that I don't think exists anymore called the National Council Against Health Fraud. And that organization would send out a monthly newsletter listing all of the fake and false claims that were being made. And most of them were fanciful, and Laetrile, for example, was a popular one. And there was all sorts of, a never-ending list of fake remedies and fake treatments and fake medical information that was floating around, that the National Council Against Health Fraud would identify and try to inform the public. I never dreamed it would get to the point where it is today. It all accelerated dramatically in the 1980s and 90s when Robert Kennedy poured fuel on the fire with his notion of vaccines causing autism. And that just unleashed the growth of this false misinformation industry. And then, of course, when social media came along and there was nobody to police the information, at least with, the New York Times, you have editors who are going to, sort of review the information to make sure it's factual. With Walter Cronkite would make sure the information was correct before he would repeat it. But that's all gone now. People don't get their information from the mainstream media. They don't get their information from like the New York Times anymore. Now, most people, believe it or not, get their information from social media, especially from Meta or Facebook and from Twitter or X. Those are now where people get information from. All you have to do is talk to people and hear the crazy conspiracy theories they talk about, whether it's in healthcare or environmental things. And you said, where'd you hear that? Where'd you get that from? They're all getting it from social media. So social media is now the pipeline. There was a book written a long time ago called The Medium is the Message by Marshall McLuhan. I remember reading it in high school, and it was all about the power of the medium. And we now live in a world where these media, social media, controls the messaging. And who controls social media? Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. And both of them are now, Zuckerberg ran over to Mar-a-Lago the other day and genuflected on his knee before the Mein Führer and agreed to make sure that Facebook no longer polices any content. So we now live in an era where people get information on whatever topic from Meta and Twitter, Meta and X, and those are wide open. Anybody can say anything. You can spread whatever kind of misinformation you want, basically, and there's no guardrails. And a lot of misinformation is coming in through those media from Russia. So the American public is getting bombarded with false stuff, and it shows up in healthcare. Nearly everything you hear today about COVID and the COVID vaccine is wrong. It's misinformation. And the McCullough Foundation is in the business of spreading misinformation. Robert Malone spreads misinformation on his Substack, where he has hundreds of thousands of paid subscribers. And the biggest source of misinformation about vaccines around the world is Robert Kennedy's organization, Children's Health Defense. So all of these organizations now have basically free access to the mind of the body politic. They can speak to the American people, convince the American people, and there's no way to rein it in. That's, they're hiding under freedom of speech. It's basically giving, a carte blanche to Typhoid Mary, no controls, no masks, no social distancing, no vaccination. It's, carte blanche to Typhoid Mary. So, I'm not optimistic for the short term. I am optimistic in the long term because I think I know what's going to happen. I'm going to make a prediction that maybe people will like. But a perfect example, let me just zoom in for a minute on the LA fires. I had a conversation with my son yesterday who rattled off a litany of conspiracy theories about the LA fires. So I did a little research and, found this like a dozen or more crazy things that are flying around out there on social media that people actually believe. That it was set by homeless there was a fire was all set by homeless meth addicts who are trying to hide tunnels from Mexico, where they're importing children for pedophiles in Hollywood. The conspiracy theories go beyond the ridiculous delusional into the realm of the truly absurd. I think we'll find out that most likely, like the fire in Maui, this was a human error, probably fireworks that didn't get put out correctly. And the wind came along a few days later and sparked the embers, and bingo, you get a fire. So Another aspect to this is not only the just a torrent of misinformation that's now unchecked on social media, is the fact that experts who counter it now are just discredited. We heard that yesterday, or I think it was yesterday, in the testimony and the evaluation for the Secretary of Defense, Peter Hegseth. And one of the Republican senators said something very interesting. He actually said that Mr. Hegseth's lack of experience is a badge of honor, that it is a credential. So we're hearing this now. This is not going to just come up with Peter Hegseth. It's actually being said throughout the whole anti-vax community. I think Steve Kirsch, the IT guy who was an anti-vaxxer, said this, that credentials don't matter anymore. And it is true. It's now gotten to the point where if you have a paper retracted, it's a badge of honor. It means your paper must have been good because they retracted it, because you were telling the truth. If you don't have the proper qualifications and credentials, that makes you a better candidate. So we're seeing the rejection of expertise, the death of expertise is really all. I would expect that as the hearings go on, for not just for Hegseth, but for Kennedy and Bhattacharya and Oz and Makari, you're going to hear the same thing, that their lack of actual training in the area that they're going to be overseeing is actually a credit to them, that their Republicans will view that as an asset, that they don't have their experience and credentials. It's a fresh point of view. Uninformed, but fresh point of view. So all this sounds, very, very dire and very sad. And I hate to be a Debbie Downer or Donald Downer this morning, but I think that ultimately Mother Nature I think we're entering a new era of dark ages. This is a new dark ages. I think this is what happened in the Middle Ages when religion dominated social thinking and science was whatever science there was relegated, marginalized. And it took, a couple of centuries for the Enlightenment to occur. I think we're entering a new dark ages. I just hope it won't take a couple of centuries to self-correct. In fact, I think it's going to happen very quickly, because Mother Nature doesn't Mother Nature doesn't look at Twitter. Mother Nature doesn't look at Facebook. Mother Nature will have the last word. It's already having the last word. Take, for example, the LA fires. It's almost impossible now to get fire insurance in California. Most private insurance companies won't write fire insurance. The state is having to write insurance now through their California Fair Plan. Why is that? Well, the insurance companies are not stupid. They have actuaries and they know the risk. They're very good at calculating risk and avoiding risk. And they know that global warming is real, that the risk of fires are real, and they are backing out of it. So the reality is Mother Nature is teaching us all a lesson through the insurance industry, who are not wanting to write fire insurance in Los Angeles. When it comes to health, it's already happening. We're already seeing resurgence of contagious infectious diseases. All those diseases, pertussis, polio, measles, mumps, chickenpox, H5N1, influenza, COVID, they're all out there. And what's keeping them at bay is our public health infrastructure, vaccination, public health measures, and so forth. As we relax that, as that all gets relaxed under Kennedy, those diseases are going to come right back in. They're at the gate. The pathogens are at the gate waiting to come back in. All it's going to take is a little decline in our preparedness. That decline is already occurring. Vaccination rates for children now have dropped overall to about 90%. They need to be at 95% in order for vaccines to work as a public health measure. You need to have everyone or nearly everyone vaccinated. When the levels fall below 95% and down to 90 and 80%, the pathogens will come back in. So ultimately, I think this will self-correct. Mother Nature will self-correct it, whether it's on environmental issues, medical issues, and they also overlap, by the way. There are a lot of medical implications to environmental things and vice versa. So I think this will all self-correct. I just don't think it'll self-correct fast enough to undo Rapey McSpraytan. That's my new name for him, is Rapey McSpraytan. I don't think it'll happen fast enough to undo the damage that he's going to do. I think the next few years are going to be a mini dark ages for the United States. We're being laughed at around the world. I was just outside the United States. I can tell you that everybody I spoke to where I was outside the United States, they're laughing at the United States in shock that we actually elected Donald Trump. So I don't think he's surrounding himself with uninformed people who are misrepresented their credentials and are spreading misinformation. Sooner or later, Mother Nature will self-correct it. I just don't know how long it will take. I hope it doesn't take 200 years. I want to see this in my lifetime, the correction occur in my lifetime, but we'll keep our fingers crossed. So those are my comments for today. And I'm curious to hear what you all think.
Well, the cream rises to the top and the mud settles to the bottom. With that, we bring in Rick Grosner, a member of the High IQ Society, Mega Society, which no one knows about except people like me who follow stuff like that. What are your comments, Rick?
Well, last week, Mel Gibson went on Joe Rogan's podcast. And it's already been viewed 7 million times.
Two geniuses.
And Mel Gibson said that 3 of his friends had been cured of stage 4 cancer by ivermectin. So,
well, maybe it cures baldness. Maybe I'll start it. Look, I like some of Mel Gibson's movies. I enjoyed some of his films.
He's a charming guy, but he believes a bunch of crazy crap.
But I have a very dear friend who knows him well. He's off his rocker. He's a big time. Well, I don't want to defame him. But he's off his rocker. My friend who knows him well. So he's gone. So he's really off in left field with his.
I did a little homework for this, and I looked up how many messages does the average social media user absorb, or at least see, per day, and the estimate is, thousands, between 4 and 10,000. I think that's a little high, but even if it's only 1,000 messages a day, that's more than 1/3 of a million messages a year. And if the messages are bullshit, they overwhelm like good information. I think back to my dad, who's a store owner in a little town, and how many messages he got. He read the newspaper. He looked at the nightly news. He read, maybe an occasional issue of Time or Newsweek. He talked to his friends. And given that network of information, there's much less room to get bombarded with BS.
Yeah, it's not possible without any guardrails. There's no way to combat this, and what Trump has just done, is open, and with the help of the courts, is just let it be wide open. Basically, it's a free market for false information, and there's no constraints out there. So, they're hiding, everything under freedom of speech, including the freedom to allow Russia to brainwash Americans. That's now protected speech.
No constraints yet. Until I think
it's called the Russian fire hose model of misinformation. That the lies don't even have to be good. If you just hit people hard enough and with enough messaging, they will be moved.
Yeah. Well, I think it's until the legal profession gets a hold of this. And there's a suit that attorneys file quite often. It's called detrimental reliance. And the lawsuit is based on this, that you listened to somebody and you relied to your detriment on his or her advice. Now, because of that, the securities industry got beat up horribly because they were, and this goes back 40 years ago when I was working with them, because of misrepresentations. Today, it's so bad that none of my securities people will ever be on any of our shows. Why not? Because they have to have what they say cleared by their broker-dealer to make sure it's factually true. Seriously. Now, in the media currently, and even in the health area, we don't have that yet. But watch what's going to happen, Dr. Patmos, because plaintiffs' attorneys are very aggressive. When somebody gets injured because they detrimentally relied on advice that came through social media, through an individual, and like the case that you said, and they kept their kid away from something that would cure them, the attorney, if they can find that person, which they will, because social media, you're basically up there, saying it. In other words, it's easy to introduce the evidence. there are going to be some major lawsuits based
Well,
on detrimental reliance. And then you're going to see them back off when they find out they're losing millions and millions of dollars in lawsuits. We saw that already with, who's that guy, Alex Jones? Remember him?
God.
Yeah, the defamation cases. I was consulting with somebody the other day about defamation cases years ago. You'd never bring a defamation case because you can't ever prove malice. It was too hard. Today, it's changed. You have to be very careful about defaming individuals. I think you're going to see a big change, and the legal industry is going to be on top of it when people get injured. And have you been injured because you relied on someone's statement on social media? Watch.
Well, here's a little shout out to all the lawyers out there and all your legal friends, Nick. Very good evidence compiled by credible sources such as the Commonwealth Fund, published papers in credible journals, reported on by NPR, confirm that at least 200,000 and perhaps as many as 400,000 Americans died unnecessarily as a result of refusal to be vaccinated against COVID. The reasons that these people refused vaccination, I know because I'm a doctor and I talk to patients who were dying of COVID. Everyone I spoke to, and I can tell you, if you talk to any doctor, they will tell you about patients who were in their last days and hours from COVID, who to the bitter end continued to believe that it was a hoax and the vaccine was dangerous. So in terms of detrimental reliance, there are hundreds of thousands of dead people out there who relied to their detriment on false information on social media from these fake medical experts. If the plaintiff's attorneys can find the families of these people, there's a bucket of money sitting out there in terms of damages, because a lot of people did die because they refused to be vaccinated because they listened to a fake expert on Fox News. Now we're seeing the same thing now. If you're not vaccinated against, if you decided not to vaccinate against measles, or you're drinking raw milk, or you decide not to vaccinate against polio and your children get sick because of it, or you relied, detrimental reliance. I love that concept, and I sure hope that the lawyers out there are listening and paying attention. There's a lot of potential litigants out there who've been harmed because they relied to their detriment on false information from unqualified physicians speaking in social media, and especially on Fox News.
I remember that Fox News actually did get a huge lawsuit against them, a judgment that they paid over $700 million. And they've cleaned up their act a lot because of that. And so the thing is, nothing hurts more these wildcatters than being hit by a major lawsuit and getting a judgment against them. And I think what you're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years, because Meta just dropped their requirements, they're not going to look at anything. And there's a lot of stuff, even in sports, which I follow, pretty fake. And then you have to go look at second sources, and they say it's just all made up, And you're going to see a lot of the made up stuff going on social media. But here's the reason why there aren't lawsuits right now. When a COVID person gets COVID because they didn't take a vaccine and they die, where did your best witness go?
Yeah.
Your best witness is in the ground.
It's amazing how you forget the dead people. People.
Exactly. I used to do estate planning, and I said, well, I bury my sins when the client dies. In other words, if I said something wrong or something happened wrong and you're doing an estate plan, the best witness against you is dead. Okay. Right. The reason why you're not seeing a lot of COVID suits, the best witness against the person who made the statement is dead. The other reason is what you said. They believe until their dying days that it was some conspiracy or some wild thing, and so they don't bring the lawsuit. However, what's going to happen is somebody's going to survive, and somebody's going to have a change of heart, and then you're going to see this misrepresentation go to a grinding halt when they end up going to court on some of these issues.
While you were talking, I did a quick search, and I don't see any pending class action lawsuits for detrimental reliance. I see a lot of.
Yeah, it hasn't started yet. I'm just saying that it will. It's similar to the cigarettes. And the other thing is they had quite a lot of lawsuits against OxyContin. I mean, this thing is, there's some people, in other words, you're almost like at the beginning of the litigation relating to the media, and it won't be the media itself, the media that delivered it, because they have an exemption. So Pod TV run under this 520 exemption. So Twitter isn't going to be sued. But the individual who made that statement, watch, they're going to end up in the wrong side of a lawsuit. And I do this all the time. You got to be real careful. So,
another example is long COVID. There's good evidence now. Many studies show, there's some that don't, but most studies that have looked at this have showed that vaccination reduces the risk of long COVID. There are millions of people out there who are still sick from COVID. They haven't fully recovered. They suffered all kinds of complications from it. They're not right neurologically. And there's good, you could make a good argument that failure to be vaccinated increased your risk for COVID and increased your risk for long COVID, and that left you dead. So those plaintiffs are still alive and damaged. They haven't quite made the connection yet. Some of the people in the long COVID community are not quite made the connection yet that they probably could have prevented some or all of their problems had they been vaccinated. But that's another place, another opportunity for the creative attorneys out there.
It's just going to take time. In other words, what happens, the legal system doesn't move fast. It moves very slowly. But as one person said, it moves very slowly, but it does move. And ALTA, the American Trial Lawyers Association, I'm positive is looking very heavily at especially the false misrepresentations that take place in the media on a daily basis, which is no problem. Until somebody listens to it and relies on it to their detriment, then you got a serious problem. Yeah.
So say one of our viewers feels that they or a family member has been damaged by COVID misinformation, but they're not a lawyer. How would they get started on like an action like this?
Well, in Florida, there's a law firm called Morgan and Morgan, and they made billions of dollars on lawsuits like this. They're always looking.
Yeah, they advertise in LA too.
Oh, they made it all the way to LA. Okay, what happened with that law firm? They made billions in plaintiffs, and the attorneys usually, when they make billions in that, they usually give up their practice and go do something else. This guy reinvested in more litigation. He loved it. So now it's a very big plaintiffs firm. So I tell people, call a plaintiffs firm like Morgan and Morgan, Justice for All, if they have a detrimental reliance suit. In other words, and you got to show that you listen to somebody's TV show. Remember, the network, at least social media networks, not other networks, are exempt, okay, because of federal law. But the person who made the statement is not exempt. And so the thing is, what happens if you can get that person making statements, which we see all the time, Dr. Pappas, and you bring it forward, and you can show that that person relied on that statement. And I'm telling you, you'll never see my business partner, Max Gouliet, T. Brad Quill, all the people I work with. You'll never see them on the Pod TV network because they're securities licensed. And if they're securities licensed, they have to have this stuff cleared through their broker dealer because they don't allow misrepresentations at all. It's tightly wound. All right. But some of these, then this is what shocked me about what I saw in the medical profession. These people are walking right into a trap. Your friendly doctors that you've discussed. The trap is they're going to get the backside of a big lawsuit because because their statements are easily found on the internet, and all you need is a person saying, "Yeah, I listened to Dr. X, and he told me that to take this, and I took it, and I relied on what he was saying." And all of a sudden, boom! Here comes the big detrimental reliance lawsuit. So
Morgan and Morgan takes what, 35% of the settlement, roughly.
Standard in the industry, and this has been debated for years because some bars say it's not correct and some say that. Usually you get like 33% if it doesn't go to trial, 40% if you try it, and then 50% if you have to go to appeal. So lawyers are very motivated. They get half the cake.
10 million Americans with long COVID times, maybe you only get a $3,000 settlement. That's what, $30 billion?
Well,
1/3 of 30 billion. Like Morgan and Morgan, if they started this suit, they could make billions of dollars.
Yeah, well, that's
Hello, Morgan.
that's what I'm saying. You are going to see this happen, because the thing is, when I looked at it, I'm going, I haven't done litigation like that in 3 decades or 4 decades. But I used to be a managing partner of a 13-member JDCPA JDL law firm, and we did litigation like that. We even litigated against Ashland Oil. I mean, we were hot litigating, and I made a ton of money litigating. I mean, you can do a lot of money, make a lot of money litigating. However, that's a past for me. There's these young bucks out there that love this stuff, and I'm looking at it, I'm going like, wow, I can't believe that not me, but your members of your club, Michael, are hanging their butts out to dry. I'm not their attorney, but if I was their attorney, I'd be having some very serious conversations with them.
It's really unfair. If I, as a doctor, tell a patient false information, then I'm liable. But if I, as a doctor, go on the media and spread false information to the public, they think that's freedom of speech. There's something wrong with that. And
it is, until somebody relies to their detriment on what they say.
Right. Well, a lot of people have.
Then you run into a serious problem. And I have to counsel my people in my pension company all the time about what they're saying. I've got one more email going out that I'm going to pull, because I'm going to look. Anything you put down on email, anything you put down in social media can and will be used against you in a court of law. So I would be very seriously cautioning your brothers and sisters. I've seen them out there making statements that are just blatantly misrepresentation, unless they want to be in the back end of a major class action suit. And like I said, I don't do medicine, but let me tell you something. Your brothers are going to have a big problem the next 5 years. And with that, we're at the hour. So we're going to be gone, and we'll see you next week on Medicine and Science on the Pod TV network. Take care and stay away from Bill and Sue. Bye-bye.